Welcome to Victor Narrates Reddit. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's begin. I lost my wallet in line at the bank on a Tuesday morning. An elderly gentleman caught up to me on the sidewalk 10 minutes later, handed it back to me, closed, refused a reward, and didn't tell me his name. He just held on to it for an extra second before letting go and said to me, "Don't open it now, son. Put it under your wife's pillow tonight and watch." I obeyed, without knowing why. And at 5:20 in the morning, out of the corner of my eye, I saw my wife recognize the wallet, look at me, and instead of waking me, she got up on her tiptoes and locked herself in the bathroom with it. 17 minutes later, she came out, left it on the nightstand as if nothing had happened, and got back into bed beside me. What I discovered next destroyed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. But let me tell you from the beginning, because the details matter. All the details matter. My name is Fabian. I'm 43 years old, and I own a mechanic shop I inherited from my father. It's not a big business, but it's mine. And in this neighborhood, everyone knows the faded green sign that my dad painted with his own hands over 30 years ago. I was widowed 6 years ago. My first wife died from a long illness that also took almost all of my savings. And for 2 years, I was a man who opened the shop out of habit, worked in silence, and returned to an empty house until Karina appeared. Karina came into my life like rain after a drought, suddenly, and making me believe I had always needed her. I met her because she brought her car to the shop, a minor electrical problem. She came back a week later with a thank you cake. She came back the next with a smile that disarmed me. She was attentive, affectionate, organized. She noticed everything. If I slept poorly, if my back hurt, if the coffee was at the temperature I liked. We got married 4 years ago, and for those 4 years, I told anyone who would listen that I was the luckiest man in the world. My friends would repeat it to me. "Fabian, you hit the lottery twice, nobody does that." My sister Juliana was the only one who didn't repeat it, but I'll tell you more about that later. That Tuesday, I went to the bank for something simple, to withdraw $800 to pay my parts supplier. Karina offered to come with me, as she almost always did. "I like taking care of you," she'd say. And I liked that she said it. But that morning, when we arrived, she said she'd rather wait for me outside because the line was long and she wanted to stop by the pharmacy on the corner. I told her yes without thinking. Detail number 1. Remember that. The line moved slowly. In front of me, a woman was arguing about a transfer. Behind me, a young man never took his eyes off his phone. At some point, I bent down to pick up a piece of paper that fell from my shirt pocket, the paper with the supplier's account number, and that's when it must have happened. I didn't feel a thing, no tug, no brush. When I got to the teller and reached for my wallet to get my ID, it wasn't there. I checked all my pockets twice, 3 times, with that desperation that rises in your chest like hot water. Nothing. I left the line, apologizing, checked the floor, asked the guard. Nothing. Inside were my ID, my cards, $240 in cash, and a small photo of my father in front of the shop, the only one I carry with me. I went outside, dizzy, thinking about calling to block the cards. Karina was not yet in sight, and then I heard a voice behind me. Young man, wait." It was a man in his 70s, thin, in a gray jacket, with the hurried walk of someone who is no longer built for hurried walks. He had my wallet in his hand, closed. "It fell out inside," he said. I picked it up near the line. The relief made me laugh. I offered him money, 20, 50, whatever he wanted. He shook his head without hesitation. I asked for his name to at least thank him properly. He didn't give me that either. And when I reached out to take the wallet, he did something strange. He didn't let go immediately. He held it for an extra second, looking me in the eyes with a seriousness that didn't fit the moment, and lowered his voice. "Don't open it now, son. Put it under your wife's pillow tonight and watch." I froze. "I'm sorry." "Do as I say. One night, just one, and watch who finds it and what they do with it." "Sir, I don't understand. Do you know my wife?" He looked over my shoulder toward the corner pharmacy, and something in his face changed. "One night," he repeated, and walked away down the street, faster than he had arrived. When I turned around, Karina was coming out of the pharmacy, waving at me, smiling, asking if everything had gone well. Detail number 2. She wasn't carrying any bag from the pharmacy. Remember that too. I didn't tell her anything about the man. I don't know why. I swear I don't know why. Something in his voice got stuck in my throat, like a small thorn you only feel when you swallow. I told her I'd wasted time in line and would get the money another day. She took my arm and talked the whole way about moving, about selling the shop, about the future. Because yes, for months we had been talking about selling my father's shop to invest in the business of Diego, her cousin, a nice guy who had dinner at our house almost every Sunday. There was already an interested buyer. We had 15 days until the signing. Detail number 3. That's the most important one of all. That night, I waited for Karina to fall asleep. I felt ridiculous. A grown man listening to a stranger from the street. But at 11:30, with my heart pounding against my ribs, I slid the closed wallet under her pillow, just peeking out from the edge, as if it had fallen there, and I lay down to pretend to sleep. I didn't sleep at all. At 5:20 in the morning, Karina moved. I felt her adjust the pillow, and then I felt her go completely still. I opened my eyes just a sliver, just enough to see in the dim light. She had my wallet in her hands. She recognized it instantly, turned it over, and then did something that chilled my blood. She looked at me, stared at me for several seconds, making sure I was asleep. And instead of waking me, instead of saying, "Honey, look what I found," she got up on her tiptoes, crossed the room without a sound, and locked herself in the bathroom with the wallet. 17 minutes. I counted them on the nightstand clock. And through the door, very faintly, I heard her voice. She was talking to someone. 17 minutes talking to someone at 5:20 in the morning, locked in the bathroom of my own house with my wallet in her hands. I didn't hear the full words. The door was thick, and she spoke in that tight whisper people use when they're afraid of sound crossing walls. But I heard fragments. I heard, "It can't be." I heard, "I'm telling you it is." And I heard something that stuck in me and didn't leave for weeks. Someone from the past. Then there was a long silence. Then the sound of the sink water running, turned on deliberately, and over the water her voice again, firmer, giving instructions I couldn't make out. When the handle turned, I shut my eyes and lay so still I could feel my own pulse in my eyelids. Karina came out of the bathroom, walked over to my side of the bed, and stood there, watching me sleep. I don't know for how long, 10 seconds, 20. I have never felt anything as uncomfortable in my life as pretending to sleep while someone watches you in the dark. Then she moved, and I heard the soft thud of the wallet being placed on the nightstand. My nightstand. She left it there, by the lamp, as if I had left it there myself when I went to bed. She got back in bed, hugged me from behind, pressed her forehead between my shoulder blades, and said very quietly, believing I was asleep, "Forgive me." I never knew if that word was the cruelest or the most human thing she said to me in 4 years of marriage. At 7, I got up as if nothing had happened. She was already in the kitchen with the coffee served at the exact temperature I like, with the toast made, humming. She came over, kissed me, adjusted the collar of my shirt with those hands of hers that always seemed to be taking care of something. "You were fighting with your pillow," she said, laughing. "You tossed and turned all night." "Yeah, I didn't even notice." "Oh, and I found your wallet on the floor next to the bed. It must have fallen. I'll put it on your nightstand." There it was, the lie served with coffee. So natural that if I hadn't been awake at 5:20, I would have believed her without blinking. And that was the first time in my life I understood something I had never wanted to understand. My wife was a good liar. She didn't lie with nerves or long excuses. She lied short, calm, with small details that made the story believable. On the floor next to the bed. Nobody invents that unless they know exactly what the truth sounds like. I smiled and said, "Thanks." I took the wallet to the shop without opening it. I waited until I was alone, with the metal shutter half down, sitting on the bench where my dad used to sit to eat, and I opened it. Everything was there. My ID, my cards, the full $240, not a bill missing, the photo of my father in front of the shop. Everything exactly as I had left it. Except for one thing. Behind the cards, in the narrow compartment where you keep papers you never look at again, there was a photograph, folded in two. Old. The paper was worn at the crease, as if someone had opened and closed it thousands of times over the years. I unfolded it. It was a wedding photo. A young woman in a simple white dress, laughing with her head thrown back, holding the arm of a thin man in a dark suit who was looking at her instead of the camera. The photo was maybe 10 or 12 years old. The woman was Karina, younger, with longer, lighter hair, with less weight in her face. But it was her. It was her without a doubt, with that mole under her left eyebrow that I kissed every morning, with that way she had of laughing with her eyes closed. And I didn't know that man. Never in 4 years had I seen that photo, or that dress, or that church. Karina had told me, the third time we went out, that she had never been married, that she'd had one long relationship that ended badly, and then she'd focused on work. She told me with moist eyes, and I took her hand across the table and told her she didn't have to talk about it if she didn't want to. I turned the photograph over. On the back, written by hand in blue ink, with that slanted handwriting of an older person, it said, Laura and Lucian. 2014, Laura. I stared at that name for so long that the light in the workshop shifted on the floor. Laura, no, Karina. Laura. And then the other thing hit me, the truly unbearable part. This photo wasn't in my wallet when I lost it. This photo was put there by the man in the gray jacket, the same man who caught up to me on the sidewalk, who didn't accept money, who didn't give his name, and who told me with a seriousness I hadn't known how to read. Put it under your wife's pillow tonight. And watch. He knew. He knew exactly what was going to happen. He knew she would open it. He knew she would find the photo, and he knew she wouldn't wake me up. I sat on the floor of the workshop, my back against the workbench, and tried to piece together something that made sense. I tried with all my might to find the normal explanation, because you always look for the normal explanation first. That's what people who love someone do. I thought, maybe she was married and was ashamed to tell me. Lots of people hide a divorce. I thought, maybe Laura is a middle name or a nickname or a mistake by whoever wrote on the back. I thought, maybe the old man is just a crazy old guy, a resentful relative, someone who hates her for old reasons and wanted to hurt her. All of those explanations worked for the photo. None of them worked for the 17 minutes. Because if my wife had found an old photo of a marriage she was ashamed of under her pillow, she would have been scared. Yes, she would have cried. Maybe she would have woken me up, furious, asking where I got it. Or she would have hidden it and stayed quiet. What she wouldn't have done, what nobody does, is lock herself in the bathroom at 5:20 in the morning to call someone else on the phone. You don't call someone about a secret that is only yours. You call when the secret belongs to two. And there, on the floor of my workshop, with the photo in my hand, I asked myself the question that would change my entire life. Who did you call, Karina? I hid the photograph in the bottom of my father's toolbox, under the tray, where she would never look. It was the first thing I had hidden from my wife in 4 years. It wouldn't be the last. That same day, at 7 in the evening, Diego showed up at my house unannounced. Diego never showed up unannounced. Diego was Karina's cousin, the nice guy from Sundays, the one with the business we were going to invest the shop money in. A pleasant guy, the kind who remembers your dog's name and asks about your back. He arrived with a bottle of wine and a folder under his arm, laughing from the doorway. Fabian, I was just passing by. Hey, I took the opportunity to bring the buyer's papers so you can look them over at your leisure. Karina came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. They greeted each other with 2 kisses, as always, natural, perfect. But I had been seeing things differently since that morning, and I saw 3 things. I saw that Diego, when he hugged her, squeezed her arm for a second longer than normal, the way you squeeze the arm of someone you're telling stay calm. I saw that Karina, when he said I was just passing by, looked at the floor, and I saw the folder, because Diego said he brought the papers for me to look over at my leisure. But when he opened it on the table, there was already a yellow sticky note on the last page with an arrow next to the signature line. Someone who is just passing by doesn't bring the signature page already marked. And when would the signing be? I asked, pouring him wine as if nothing was wrong. Diego smiled. 15 days, brother. 15 days, and you start a new life. Karina took my hand across the table. A new life, she repeated. And I thought, no, 15 days for who? Exactly? That night, after Diego left, I did something I had never done. I searched my own house. I waited for Karina to fall asleep. This time I didn't pretend. This time I really couldn't even close my eyes. At 1 in the morning, I got up, barefoot, and started with the most obvious. The folder Diego had left on the dining room table. It was 20 pages, a purchase agreement for the workshop with the buyer's name, some man I had never seen in my life, and an amount, $195,000. The shop, the land, the back storeroom, the tools, everything my father built in 31 years, summarized in a number and a dotted line. I already knew that number. We had discussed it at the table, with Diego explaining with drawings on a napkin how that $195,000 would become the capital for the partnership. How in 3 years I'd be earning triple without getting up at 6 in the morning or coming home with my hands black with grease. Karina, squeezing my shoulder, "You've worked enough, my love." What I didn't know was page 14. On page 14, in fine print, there was a clause about the payment method. The buyer wouldn't pay the total amount upon delivery. He would deposit a portion, $5,000, and transfer the rest to an account of the already established partnership, whose number was written right there. A partnership that, according to the paper, had already existed for 7 months. 7 months. I had accepted the idea of selling the shop 4 months ago. 4. I remember it perfectly because it was after I had pneumonia, when I was in bed for 12 days and Karina took care of me like you'd care for a child. And one afternoon, sitting on the edge of the bed, she told me, crying, that she was afraid the work would kill me like it killed my dad. But the partnership where the money from my workshop was going to land had existed for 3 months before I even said yes. I sat in the darkness of the dining room with page 14 in my hand and felt a cold that didn't come from the weather. It wasn't anger yet, it was something else. It was the exact feeling of standing on a floor you thought was concrete, only to discover there's a hole beneath it, and that the hole has been there for a long time, and you've been walking over it without knowing. I kept searching. Karina was orderly, obsessively orderly. And for the first time, I understood that order also serves to hide things. Everything in that house had its place and its explanation, but there's one thing orderly people can't avoid. They keep important things in the same type of place, always. I found 3 things that night. The first, in the drawer of the entryway table, under a pad of receipts, was an unopened bank envelope addressed to me, dated 5 weeks ago. I never saw it arrive, and it wasn't the only one. There was another one underneath from 2 months earlier, also unopened, also in my name. I don't check the mail. Karina always got the mail because I leave early for the shop and she stays. "I'll handle the papers, you handle the engines," she'd say, laughing. I didn't open them that night. I forced myself not to. If I opened them and she noticed, it would all be over. That was the first moment I stopped being a man who was discovering something and started being a man who was playing a game. The second thing I found was in the closet, in the shoebox where Karina keeps documents. Her ID, our marriage certificate, car papers, everything in order, everything in Karina's name. But at the bottom, folded inside an old envelope, was a receipt from a moving company. From 2019, from a city 8 hours from here, a place Karina had never told me about and that I was sure, absolutely sure, she had never mentioned because she always told me she came from the coast. And on the receipt, in the sender's box, a name that wasn't hers, only the last name partially matched. The first name said Laura. The third thing, I didn't find it, I heard it. It was almost 3 a.m. when Karina's phone, which was charging in the kitchen, vibrated on the counter. Once, twice. I got closer. The screen lit up with a notification, and I managed to read it before it went dark. A single line. "You've got it under control." And above it, the contact name, Dentist. Diego had been eating at my table for 3 Sundays telling me his business was importing auto parts. Never in 4 years had Karina gone to the dentist. I went back to bed, lay down next to my wife, listened to her breathe peacefully, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. At some point, she turned in her sleep and put her arm across my chest, as she always did, and I lay still, feeling that weight on me as if it were a stone. The next day, at the shop, I made the first call of my new life. I called my sister, Juliana. Juliana is 2 years older than me. She's a lawyer, and we had been speaking little for almost 2 years, not because of a fight, but because of distance. A distance that had grown on its own, little by little, almost without me noticing. A canceled dinner, a birthday we were late for, A Sunday when Karina felt sick right before we were supposed to leave. Juliana had said things about Karina at the beginning, things I didn't want to hear. That she was moving too fast, that she asked too much about the shop, that she had asked to see the deed to the house 2 months after meeting me. I got angry. I told her she was bitter, that she couldn't stand to see me happy again. It was the ugliest thing I've ever said to anyone in my life. The line was busy twice. The third time, she answered, "Fabian, Juliana," and nothing else came out. I just stood there with the phone pressed to my ear in the middle of my father's workshop, 43 years old, unable to speak. She waited, she didn't rush me, and then she said very slowly, "What did she do to you?" And that question, that exact question with that verb in the past tense, as if she had been waiting 2 years for the day I would call, broke me completely. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop far from my neighborhood. I told her everything from the beginning, the line at the bank, the man in the gray jacket, the wallet, the pillow, the 17 minutes, the photo, the name, the folder, page 14, the 7-month-old partnership, the unopened envelopes, the moving receipt, the dentist. I talked for almost an hour without stopping. She didn't interrupt me once, just took notes. When I finished, she put her pen on the table and looked at me. "Fabian, listen to me carefully, because this is the most important thing you're going to hear this week." She leaned closer. "There is no crime." "What do you mean there's no crime?" "She's lying to me. She has another name. She has a guy. There is no crime yet." And she tapped the paper with her finger. "Look at yourself from the outside. No one forged anything. No one stole anything from you. No one broke into your house. You are going to sign the contract voluntarily, with your own hand, in front of a notary, with your wife by your side, smiling. If you go to the police tomorrow and say, 'My wife used to be named Laura,' they're going to ask you if that's a crime. And it's not. Changing cities is not a crime. Hiding a previous marriage is not a crime. Having a lover is not a crime. Convincing your husband to sell a business is not a crime." So what do I do? Juliana was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, she lowered her voice. "Nothing. For now, absolutely nothing. You keep having breakfast with her, you keep talking about the move, you keep being the Fabian she thinks you are. Because the minute she realizes, these people do one of two things. Either they disappear that same night, and you never see a scent or a piece of evidence again, or they accelerate everything and make you sign before you can react." She took my hand. "We need to know who Laura was, and above all, we need to know what happened to the man in the photo. Lucian. Lucian." She wrote the name down and underlined it twice. "Fabian. A woman doesn't take on a new name for no reason, and a strange old man doesn't approach a stranger on the street to warn him without a massive reason." That night, I came home with a bag of sweet bread, the kind Karina likes, and told her I'd had a good day. We had dinner, we laughed, we watched television with her head on my shoulder, and at 11, when she fell asleep, I took out my phone and searched online for the first time. Those two words together, the name Lucian and the name of the city from the moving receipt. The third result was a note from a local newspaper from 2021. It was an obituary. The obituary was 4 lines long and had a photo so small I had to zoom in until the pixels dissolved. It was him, the man in the dark suit, the one in the wedding photo who was looking at the bride instead of the camera. In this image, he was older, much older than a 7-year difference should account for. He had the gaunt face and sunken eyes of someone who had stopped sleeping long before he died. It said that Lucian had passed away at the age of 46, suddenly, at his residence. It said the burial would be private. It said he was survived by his father. It didn't mention a wife. It didn't mention a widow. It didn't mention Laura. I turned off the phone and sat on the edge of the bed in the darkness, listening to my wife breathe. 46 years old. Sudden. At his residence. 3 phrases that in a newspaper mean nothing and that at 11:30 at night mean everything. And for the first time since this started, I felt fear. Physical fear, the kind that dries your mouth. Because I was 43. I had also been sick 4 months ago. Pneumonia that had me in bed for 12 days. 12 days in which she fed me, gave me my pills, touched my forehead. 12 days in which I never once left that house. I got up and went to the bathroom to splash water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror and force myself to think slowly, because fear makes you think fast and crooked. Nobody poisoned someone with pneumonia. I got better. The doctor was mine, from the neighborhood, not hers. And above all, if Karina had wanted to kill me, she would have done it already. You don't marry a man for 4 years for that. No, the thing with Lucian was something else, and that something else was what I still didn't understand. I went back to bed. Karina turned and, without waking up, reached for my hand. The next day, I sent the obituary to Juliana. She replied in 20 minutes with a single line. I'll look for the certificate. Give me 2 days. Don't do anything. I did something. I couldn't help it. At noon, I closed the shop for an hour and went to the bank, the same bank. Not to the teller, but to the sidewalk, to the corner, and I just stood there like an idiot, watching people pass by, looking for a gray jacket among 100 people. I went back on Thursday. I went back on Friday. I asked the guard at the entrance if he knew an elderly, thin man, about 70, who hung around there. The guard shrugged. We get 200 old men a day, young man. On Friday, as I was leaving, the guard caught up to me at the door. Hey, the one in the gray jacket, who sits on the bench across the street and never comes in. My heart stopped. Yeah, he comes on Tuesdays around 10, sits there on the median bench for a while. I thought he was waiting for someone. He scratched his head. He's been doing that for months. Months. That man had been sitting across from my bank for months. It wasn't a coincidence that he was there the Tuesday my wallet fell. It wasn't a coincidence that he picked it up. He was there before. He was waiting for something or watching someone. And the following Tuesday at 10 in the morning, I was sitting on that bench waiting for him. He arrived at 10:15 with the same gray jacket and a folded newspaper under his arm. When he saw me sitting there, he stopped dead in his tracks, 10 meters away. For a second, I thought he was going to turn around and run. I'm returning this, I said and showed him the photograph. He approached slowly and sat at the other end of the bench, looking straight ahead, as if we were two strangers sharing a patch of shade. Did you open it? He asked. I put it under her pillow like you said, and I watched. And what did you see? I saw my wife recognize it, look at me to make sure I was sleeping, and lock herself in the bathroom for 17 minutes to talk on the phone with someone. My voice broke on the last word, and I was angry that it broke. Afterward, she told me she found it on the floor. The man closed his eyes and nodded very slowly, several times, like someone receiving a confirmation he had been dreading for years. So it is her, he said. Who are you? He took a long time to answer. When he did, he didn't look at me. My name is Enrique. The man in the dark suit in that photo was my son. The street noise continued. The cars, the people, a vendor shouting something on the corner, and I suddenly stopped hearing all of it. Lucian. He smiled faintly, a horrible sort of smile. I told him not to marry her. I told him that woman asked too many questions about the business, that she asked about the insurance policies, that she asked about me. He told me I was a bitter old man who couldn't stand to see him happy. He turned his head and finally looked at me. Sound familiar? I couldn't answer. It had been said to me, word for word, from my own mouth, to my sister's face. They lasted 3 years, Enrique continued. In 3 years, my son sold the storefront, then the apartment, then the car. All of his own free will, all signed by him. Nobody forced him to do anything, you understand? Nobody stole anything from him. One day, he was 43 with a business, and the next he was 46, living in a rented room, not talking to anyone in the family, no friends, owing money to people I didn't even know. He squeezed the newspaper, and one night, his heart just told him no. The landlady only found him 3 days later. And she had left 8 months before. With everything. Legally. With everything. Enrique fell silent. I went to the police. I went twice. A man explained to me very patiently that my son was an adult who had signed his own papers, and that the lady had no complaints against her. They asked if I had proof of anything. I had a dead son and a wedding photo. That's not proof. We both sat there, looking at the bank across the street. How did you find her? I didn't find her. I looked for her for 4 years in 3 cities. And 8 months ago, I saw her come out of that bank right here. He pointed with his chin. She came out the side door, the one for the executives. And she didn't come out alone. I felt my stomach drop. She came out with a man in his 40s in a suit with a folder. And that young man, I had seen him before, in the other city, in my son's life. He introduced himself as a consultant. He brought Lucian the business he invested the money from the storefront in. Enrique spoke very slowly, emphasizing each word. She doesn't work alone. She has never worked alone. Diego, I said. I knew him by another name. I closed my eyes. Diego at my table on Sundays. Diego asking about my back. Diego drawing on a napkin how we were going to triple the money. Diego squeezing Karina's arm for 1 second too long. And why didn't you just talk to me directly? Why the wallet, the game, the pillow? Enrique looked at me with a sadness you can't show a stranger. Because if I walk up to you on the street and say, your wife killed my son, what do? I thought about it and was honest. I would have told you were crazy. And that night, I would have told her. Exactly, he nodded. And the next day, you'd move out of the city. And in a year, there's another Fabian. He stood up slowly, using his knee for support. I didn't need you to believe me. I needed you to see it with your own eyes. The only thing a man can't deny is what he saw. Before leaving, he stopped. How long until you sign something? 11 days. Enrique stared at me for a long moment. With my son, it was also 11. After the signing, young man, there's no story left. After the signing, there's just a man alone with a piece of paper in his hand. 11 days. I went back to the workshop and stood in the middle of the concrete floor, looking at the faded green sign from the inside, the letters reversed. My dad painted that sign on a Sunday with 2 cans of paint up on a wobbly ladder while I, at 10 years old, held it, terrified he would fall. 11 days until that sign belonged to someone else. And then something happened inside me that I can't quite explain. My fear ran out. It didn't disappear completely, but something else covered it, something heavier and colder. I stopped feeling like a man who was being deceived and started feeling like a man who had 11 days. That night, I came home and was the best husband in the world. I brought flowers. I told Karina I'd been thinking and that she was right, that I had worked enough, that my dad died with black hands and I didn't want that. I told her I was tired, that I wanted to start over, that I wanted a place where she could have her garden. Karina stood still with the flowers in her hand, and I saw her face. Relief. Pure, naked relief for a second before her smile covered it. Her shoulders relaxed, the way someone's shoulders relax when they've been carrying something heavy for days. She hugged me tight, her face hidden in my neck, and said, "Thank you, my love. Thank you." And I, with my hands on her back, staring at the wall over her shoulder, understood exactly what Juliana had told me. The minute she suspects, it's all over. She had been nervous. The 17 minutes in the bathroom had left her nervous, and I had just put her at ease. That was the first big lie I told my wife. Many more would follow. I learned quickly. I learned from her. The next day, what Juliana called the reconstruction began. We met in her office at lunchtime, with the door closed, and she wrote in a hardcover notebook. On the first page, she wrote 2 columns, Lucian and Fabian. She asked me to tell her about my entire marriage from the first day, unadorned with dates. Why? Because if this is a pattern, it has to repeat. And if it repeats, it stops being bad luck and starts being a method. A method can be proven, Fabian. A broken heart cannot. Enrique joined us for the 3rd lunch. He arrived with a cardboard box tied with string, the kind that smells of a closed-up house. Inside were 4 years of his life. Lucian's receipts, bank letters, the deed for the sold storefront, handwritten notes with dates, even the notebook where he noted what time he called his son and whether he answered or not. Juliana opened the box and started reading. At some point, she looked up, and it was no longer my sister speaking, it was the lawyer. "Enrique, did your son fight with you over money?" "We never fought because I said she asked too many questions." And when he stopped answering my calls, Enrique looked through his notebook. "Here, March. After a dinner at his house, I made a comment about the business, and she came out of the kitchen crying, and Lucian asked me to leave. After that, 3 months without speaking." Juliana made a note. She looked at me. "Fabian, when did you stop talking to me?" My throat tightened. After a dinner, I said. At my house. You said she had asked to see the deed, and she got up from the table crying. And I told you that you were bitter. And who told you that first, Fabian? Did the word bitter just pop into your head? I thought back, and the whole scene came to me, crystal clear, as if someone had wiped a dirty window. Karina in the hallway after Juliana left, her eyes red, telling me slowly, almost with pity, "Don't pay any attention to her, my love. Your sister is a bitter woman. She can't stand to see you happy again." I had screamed it at my sister 20 minutes later, believing it was my own thought. Juliana wrote in the notebook, in the middle column, one word, isolation. And underneath, Lucian's date and mine. Enrique said nothing, just stared at his hands. We continued, and what appeared on that page over the next 2 hours is the coldest thing I have ever seen. The illness. Lucian had hepatitis in his second year, 40 days in bed, with her taking care of him. When he got up, he had already agreed to sell the storefront, Enrique said. I had pneumonia in my third year, 12 days in bed, with her taking care of me. When I got up, I had already accepted the idea of selling the shop. It's not a coincidence, Juliana said. It's the timing. A sick man, lying down, not working, staring at the ceiling. He's a man you can tell. This is killing you, and he'll believe you. It's not a lie. In fact, that's what's so perfect about it. It's a truth used at the exact right moment. The consultant. A partner appeared for Lucian, introduced by her. For me, a cousin who was already part of the family. Same man, different name, same function. To be the technical voice, the one who brings the numbers, the one who isn't the wife. Because if the wife pushes you, you get suspicious. If the wife hesitates and the other guy insists, you trust them both. The partnership. Enrique had the paper. The partnership where his son's money landed was formed 6 months before Lucian agreed to sell. Mine, 7. They build the box before they convince the man, Juliana said. Always. And finally, the last piece, the one I was missing. Juliana took a copy of an old bank document from Enrique's box. The stamp faded. She read it twice. Then she passed it to me without a word. It was a beneficiary designation for a life insurance policy taken out by Lucian 14 months before he died, with a high premium, the kind you pay when someone insists a lot that you have to be responsible, that you have to think about the future, about what happens if one day you're not there. Beneficiary her. She didn't collect it, Enrique said in a low voice. She left 8 months before. When he died, she had already changed her name and didn't claim anything. I thought about it 1,000 times why. And I think the answer is the simplest one. Collecting it would put her on an official paper next to the deceased. She doesn't collect if it leaves a trail. She collects while you're alive. And that's when I realized something I hadn't wanted to think about until that moment. Juliana, I said 5 months ago, I signed an insurance policy. Silence in the office. It was Diego's idea. After the pneumonia, he said a man going into a partnership has to be covered, that it was a requirement, that it was normal. Karina cried. She said she didn't even want to talk about it, that it scared her. Diego insisted. I signed just so they would stop arguing. Juliana closed the notebook. Listen to me carefully. You are not in mortal danger, Fabian, and I don't want you to go crazy over this. These people don't kill. It's not necessary, and it's a huge risk. What happened to Lucian was a heart that got tired of living with nothing. But the insurance policy isn't there in case you die. She looked at me. It's there because it's the final piece. When they sell the idea of the partnership, the insurance is part of the new life package. It's what makes everything seem serious. It's what makes a man sign without reading. I went home that night at 9. Karina was at the dining room table with the computer, looking at houses in the other city, the city we were supposed to move to after the sale. She called me over to see one with a garden. I sat next to her and told her it was beautiful. She rested her head on my shoulder. You know what I want most, Fabian? What? To see you rest. Nothing more. To see you one morning without having to get up. And she said it with such a real, seamless sweetness that for a second, a whole second, everything inside me churned. And I thought, what if I'm wrong? What if Enrique is crazy? What if Juliana sees crimes where there are only coincidences? What if this woman just loves me? Then her phone rang in the kitchen. She got up to answer it and lowered her voice as she passed the doorway. And from the dining room, in the reflection of the window, I saw her nod 3 times and say 2 words that read the same in any language when you already know how to look. 9 days. 9 days. That night, lying next to her, I did the math of my entire life, and it all came out wrong. And I understood that I could no longer be a man who just writes things in a notebook while the calendar runs out. Juliana had a pattern. Enrique had a dead son. I had 9 days and no proof, because that was the unbearable part. Everything we knew was true, and none of it was useful. A pattern is not a crime. An old name is not a crime. A lover is not a crime. We needed them to do something, and for them to do it, they had to feel completely safe. The next day, I started lying in earnest. I called Diego myself, something I had never done. I told him I wanted to move everything up, that I had waited long enough, that I was impatient, that if we could sign sooner, all the better. I asked him about the partnership, about the percentages, if I needed to bring any documents. Diego laughed on the other end of the line, and it was a real, comfortable laugh, the laugh of a man who was winning. Fabian, brother, that's the attitude. No, you don't worry about a thing. I'll bring everything. You show up, sign, and go have lunch with your wife. It's just that I want to understand the partnership thing better, Diego. The percentages. There was a very short pause, a quarter of a second. Of course. Look, we'll go over that calmly after the signing. That part is just boring paperwork. The important thing is to close the sale. I hung up and stared at the phone. After the signing. Everything was after the signing, like a room they make you enter first and only then explain where the door is. That night, I told Karina I had called Diego to move up the signing. We were having dinner. She put her fork down on the plate, got up, hugged me from behind the chair, and kissed the top of my head. And in the reflection of the window, I saw her face as she hugged me. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes were open, fixed on the wall, calculating. Then she told me she was proud of me. Then she served me more food. Then she asked, very softly, while clearing the plates, if I had spoken with my sister lately. And that's when the game of masks with Juliana began. No, why? No reason. It's just that I saw her. She turned on the water. On Tuesday, I was downtown and I saw her coming out of a coffee shop. My brain did 3 things at once. Remembered that Juliana and I had met on a Tuesday. Remembered it was at a coffee shop downtown, and understood that Karina hadn't seen her while passing by, because Karina had no reason to be downtown on a Tuesday at noon. They had followed me, or he had followed her. And you didn't say hi? I said, pouring myself water with a hand that, by some miracle, didn't shake. No, I was in a hurry. She turned off the faucet, turned around and leaned against the sink, drying her hands on a cloth, looking at me. She was with an older man. The entire workshop came crashing down on me. Enrique had come to the 3rd lunch, and in that moment in my kitchen, with my wife looking at me with the cloth in her hands, I knew I was one move away from losing everything. If I lied and she already knew, it was over. If I told the truth, it was over anyway. So I did the only intelligent thing I could think of all week. I gave her a smaller truth to cover the bigger one. I slumped my shoulders, sighed. I put on the face of a trapped man. Okay, yes, I talked to her. Karina didn't move. Fabian, wait. I called her. I ran a hand over my face. I called her because I'm embarrassed, Karina. Because I haven't spoken to my sister in 2 years. And now it turns out I'm selling Dad's shop and leaving town. I didn't want her to find out from someone else. That's all. I told her I was going to sell. She got angry. Told me I was crazy. That the shop belonged to my father. We argued again. That's why I didn't tell you. My voice was actually trembling because I didn't have to fake it. The old man is her partner, I think, some old lawyer. I don't know, she didn't even introduce me. Karina was silent. 5 seconds, 10. The kitchen faucet dripped, and then her face softened. She came over, sat on my lap, and took my face in both her hands. My love, I've told you 1,000 times. She can't stand to see you happy. She kissed my forehead. Promise me something. Promise me you won't let her get in your head these next few days. 9 days, Fabian. 9 days and this is all over. 9 days. I repeated, and smiled at her like a grateful man. That night, when she fell asleep, I went out to the patio and sent a single message to Juliana. They saw the three of us. We're not meeting again, just you and me, and at your house. The next day, at my sister's house, with the curtains drawn, Juliana put 2 sheets of paper on the table. First of all, I know who the buyer of your workshop is. Oh, nobody. She pushed the first sheet over. He exists. He's a real person, but he's a 78-year-old retiree who lives 400 kilometers away, and his name appears as a buyer or partner in 4 different operations over 2 years. Fabian, he's a frontman. That man isn't going to buy your workshop. Someone is going to use his signature to receive it. And the money? The money goes into the partnership's account. And here's the second thing. She pushed the other sheet over. I requested the full articles of incorporation. You appear as a partner with 49%. And the other 51% is in the name of a second company, and that second company has a single sole administrator with the power to dispose of assets without consulting the other partner. She looked up. The administrator's name is Laura. There it was. There was at last in black and white. So, I sell my father's workshop, put $195,000 into a partnership where I have 49%, and she can take it all out without asking me? Without asking you, without notifying you, and without it being illegal because you will have signed it. Juliana leaned back in her chair. Fabian, this isn't a robbery. This is a funnel, and it's built with such patience that if you sign, there's no lawyer in this country who can get it back for you. I stared at the paper with the name Laura typed on it. But there's the old name. That's something, not a fake identity. Not necessarily. She could have legally changed her name at some point, or she could have documents with both names from a paperwork error. If we report it today, she shows up with a document, says it's an administrative change, and she's out on the street in 2 hours. Juliana took my hand, and that same afternoon, they both disappear, with the partnership already formed, the buyer already lined up and looking for the next one. Then what? My sister was quiet for a long time, and then she said the phrase that decided everything that came next. Then we let them sign. I looked at her, not understanding. Not you, she said. Them, Fabian. The only moment these people commit a real, provable crime that can't be explained away with he signed voluntarily is the day of the signing. Because that day, in front of a notary, they will have to state things with their own mouths that are lies. They will have to present a buyer who doesn't exist. They will have to tell you to your face what the money is for. And there, and only there, they stop being a loving wife and a nice cousin and become 2 people committing fraud. She leaned closer. 9 days. We're going to get to that signing. But when we get there, the notary is going to be mine. The buyer who sits in that chair is going to be mine. And in that room, there will be people they think don't exist. I felt something I hadn't felt since that Tuesday at the bank. Hope. And if it goes wrong? Juliana didn't tell me it wouldn't go wrong. Then you sign for real, and you lose everything. That's why I need you to tell me now if you are capable of sitting in your house for 9 days, having breakfast with that woman, without letting anything show on your face. I thought of the green sign. I thought of Enrique saying, after the signing, there's just a man alone with a piece of paper in his hand. I am capable, I said. 9 days living inside a lie, sleeping next to her, eating what she cooked. I learned things about myself I didn't know. I learned that you can genuinely laugh at a joke told by the person who is destroying you. I learned that the body doesn't obey. Twice I had to get up from the table to vomit and told her it was my stomach. And I learned that Karina wasn't a good liar because of talent, but because of habit. Lying every day for years keeps your hands steady. Juliana gave me 3 rules. 1. Never ask anything you wouldn't have asked a month ago. 2. If they put a paper in front of you, read it with a bored expression. 3. If one day she changes her mood for no reason, let me know that very hour, because it means Diego called her. I followed all 3. On day 7, what we had to provoke happened. Diego came on Sunday as always, with wine and the folder. We ate. He talked about soccer, asked about my back, laughed at everything. And over coffee, He took out the papers and asked me to sign some preliminary documents to speed things up for Thursday. I took them, glanced at them with the most bored face in the world, the face Juliana had made me practice in front of her bathroom mirror. And what's this? Nothing, brother. A simple power of attorney, so I can pick up certificates in your name and you don't have to go yourself. A power of attorney. A general, broad power of attorney with powers of administration and ownership. With that in hand, they wouldn't even need Thursday. And there, in my dining room, with Karina serving coffee, I suddenly understood something that chilled me. If I had been the Fabian from 3 weeks ago, I would have signed it. I would have signed it without reading, laughing, telling him thanks for saving me the trouble. Ugh, Diego, I don't have my glasses today, I said and pushed the papers away. Do you mind if I look at it on Tuesday? If I sign something without reading it, my dad will rise from the grave to pull my ear. Half a second of silence. Karina, behind him, was frozen with the coffee pot in midair. Then Diego let out a loud laugh and slapped my shoulder. Well done. That's the way. Your dad was right. He took the papers and didn't insist again. But when he went out to the patio for a smoke, Karina went with him. I watched him from the window. She was talking fast with her hands. He was shaking his head and looking toward the house. That night, Karina was different, quiet during dinner, and later in bed in the dark she said, "Do you trust me, Fabian?" I stared at the ceiling with my eyes closed. She was still for a while. Then she said something that stays with me to this day. I wasn't always a good person, you know? Before you, I did things I'm not proud of. My breath caught. It was happening. She was opening a door. We've all done things, I said, with all the calm I could muster. But with you, I wanted to be different. And her voice broke. And it wasn't an act, or if it was the best I've ever seen. I really wanted to. Wanted. Past tense. She hugged me and fell asleep before I did. And I lay awake, understanding something horrible and complicated. That probably both were true, that she could be emptying my life with Diego and at the same time, in some corner of her heart, have wanted to stay. That it didn't save her from anything, and that the most dangerous thing about that woman wasn't that she faked affection, but that sometimes she didn't. The next day, I told Juliana about the power of attorney. Fabian listened to me. That changes everything, but in our favor. She was on her feet, pacing the living room. A broad power of attorney, on a Sunday, in your house, without a notary, presented as a minor formality. That's not a gray area. That's intent. But I didn't sign it. No, and that's the best part. It exists, it's drafted, it's dated, and they have it in their folder. They won't destroy it because they plan to use it on Thursday if something goes wrong. She stopped. That document is going to be on that table, brother, and that document is going to sink them. Then she told me the full plan. Juliana had arranged 2 things in 5 days. The first, a notary, a man in his late 60s who had been her professor, honest to a fault, who agreed to handle the transaction in his office on Thursday at 11. Diego had suggested another notary, but I had the perfect excuse, and I used it. He's a family friend, he gives me a discount. My dad did his deeds with him. No one finds it strange that a man wants to save money. The second, the buyer. A real man will be sitting in that chair, Juliana said, with real identification, real financial capacity, and who will be willing to ask out loud exactly what we need them to answer. His name is Marco. He's been a client of mine for 15 years, and he's going to ask Diego 3 questions. Which ones? 1. To whose name is the payment issued? 2. Why isn't the money going into your personal account? And 3. The simplest one in the world, the one no thief can answer without lying. And what is your relationship to the seller? I was silent, because if Diego says he's your cousin-in-law, he's lying in front of a notary. If he says he's the financial advisor, he has to explain why the payment is going to a partnership administered by your wife. And if Karina opens her mouth to help him, she implicates herself. Juliana sat across from me. Fabian, these people have been winning for years because no one asks them questions out loud and on the record. They do everything in kitchens, over dinner in whispers. We're going to put them in a room where everything they say is recorded. And Enrique? Enrique will be in the notary's waiting room, and he won't come in until I open the door. Juliana lowered her voice. That's the other point. They don't know Enrique exists. Karina hasn't seen him in 11 years and thinks he's an old man who lost everything in another city, who nobody ever believed. Diego has never seen him. And what does Enrique gain by coming in? My sister took a moment to answer. His son, Fabian. You understand, as long as this is just about you, it's a local, ugly fraud with lawyers that could end in a settlement. But if it's proven in that room that these two people have done the exact same thing before, with different names in another city, to a man who ended up dead and alone, then it's no longer a dispute between spouses. It's a pattern, and a pattern opens old files. Wednesday night, the eve of the signing, Karina ironed my blue shirt and hung it on the closet door. We had an early dinner. She talked about the house with the garden, the weather there, how she wanted to learn to make bread. I listened to her, really listened, watching her, memorizing the face she had that night because I knew it was the last time I would see that woman, my woman, the one I had invented over 4 years. Before bed, she stroked my hair. By this time tomorrow, we'll be different people, she said. Yes, I answered. By this time tomorrow, we won't be the same. And at 5:20 in the morning, just like that other time, I opened my eyes in the dark. But this time, I was the one who was awake, and I was the one who was watching. 6 hours to go. We arrived at the notary's office at 11:10. Karina was wearing a light-colored dress, holding my arm, smelling of the perfume I gave her on our first anniversary. Diego was already at the door in a suit, with the folder, with that smile of a man about to close the deal of a lifetime. There's the new man. He hugged me. A little nervous, I said, and it was true. We were shown into a long room with a dark wood table and 8 chairs. At the head, the notary, a gray-haired man with thick glasses who greeted everyone with the same polite coolness. To his right, a secretary with a computer. And sitting on the other side of the table, with a folder and a glass of water, was a calm man in his 50s, the kind who doesn't need to speak loudly. Good morning, he said and stood to shake my hand. Marco. The buyer. Diego approached him, smiling. A pleasure, sir. I'm the one who has coordinated the operation. Ah, Marco said, sitting down. Perfect. I have a few questions for you. Then the notary began to read the contract aloud, as required by law, word for word, with a slowness that made me sweat. Karina had her hand on my knee under the table. She would squeeze it affectionately every so often. When the notary reached the clause on the payment method, Marco raised his hand. Pardon me, before we continue. To whose name do I issue the payment? Diego answered immediately, naturally. To the partnership. The account is there on page 14. I see. But I'm buying a property owned by Mr. Fabian. Marco leaned back. Why isn't the money from the sale going into the seller's personal account? Because the gentleman is contributing that capital to a partnership he is a part of. It's a matter of efficiency, sir. And does the seller administer that partnership? A pause. A tiny one. The gentleman holds 49%. I didn't ask the percentage, Marco said, without raising his voice. I asked who administers it. The notary looked up from his papers for the first time, and I felt Karina's hand on my knee go still. The administration is handled by the partner company, Diego said. And who is the sole administrator of that company? Silence. 4 seconds of silence in a room with 7 people is an eternity. My wife, I said. Everyone looked at me. Karina turned her head slowly. It's my wife, I repeated, looking at Marco. Her name is Karina. Well, here it says her name is Laura. Karina didn't move a muscle, but I saw her neck. Her whole neck tensed. Diego let out a short laugh. There's a data entry error in the document. It's a mistake by the accountant. We're already correcting it. Excuse me, Marco said, pulling a sheet from his folder. I also had a question about that. And a third question, the simplest one. He looked Diego in the eye. What is your relationship to the seller? I'm his cousin-in-law. My wife's cousin. On whose side? And there, for the first time, Diego didn't answer quickly. Her mother's. What was her mother's name? Juliana said. No one had seen her enter. She was standing by the door with a folder under her arm. The secretary stopped typing. Karina shot up from her chair as if propelled by a spring. Fabian, let's go. Sit down, Karina. Fabian, let's go now. Sit down, I said. And I didn't shout. And I think that's what made her sit, because in 4 years I had never spoken to her like that. And a woman who studies men the way she does knows how to recognize when the man in front of her is no longer the same. Juliana walked forward and placed her folder on the table. Mr. Notary, my name is Juliana. I'm a lawyer representing the seller. Before anything is signed, I want to have 3 issues noted in the record. This is an outrage, Diego said, standing up. We came here to— Please sit down, the notary said. And he said it with a tone that made it clear who was in charge of that room. Juliana took out the papers one by one and laid them on the table like someone dealing cards. First, the buyer listed in the original contract that this gentleman brought 3 weeks ago is not Mr. Marco. It's a 78-year-old retiree who lives 400 kilometers away and whose name appears in 4 different operations in 2 years. Here are the 4. She put down the sheet. Second, the partnership receiving the money was incorporated 3 months before my brother even agreed to sell his workshop. Here is the certificate with the date. She put down the sheet. And third, she looked at Diego. Last Sunday at the seller's home, you presented him with a general power of attorney with powers of ownership for his signature, presenting it as a minor formality, without a notary, over coffee. That's false. It's in your folder, I said. Diego froze with his hand on the folder, and that gesture, that still hand on the leather, was what made the notary take off his glasses. Sir, the notary said slowly, I'm going to ask you to show me the document the lawyer is referring to. If you don't have it, say so, and we will continue. No one spoke for a long time, and then Karina did something none of us expected. She turned to me, her eyes full of tears, and took my hand in both of hers. Fabian, my love, listen to me. Her voice was trembling. I didn't know anything about this. I swear on my life. He told me it was the best for us. He handled everything. I just signed what he put in front of me because I trusted him, because he's my family. Diego looked at her like you look at a dog that bites its owner. I don't understand papers, you know that. You know I don't understand any of that. And it was perfect. It was so good, so well done, with those tears falling at the exact right moment, that if I hadn't spent 11 weeks looking at that face from the outside, I would have believed her. And worse, almost everyone in that room started to doubt. I saw the notary hesitate. I saw the secretary look down. I let go of her hand. Karina, just one thing. I took a folded paper from my inside jacket pocket and put it on the table in front of her. Who is this man? It was the photograph. The wedding one, the one with the white dress and the thin man looking at her instead of the camera. Karina saw it and stopped crying. Instantly, like a light being switched off. And for 2 seconds, just 2 seconds, her face fell. And what was behind it was not a scared woman or a deceived wife. It was something still cold, calculating exits. It was the only moment in 4 years that I saw my wife for real. Where did you get that? She said. And her voice was different now, lower, flatter. The door to the room opened, and Enrique walked in. Karina shot up so fast she knocked over her chair. Diego didn't know him and understood nothing. He looked at the old man, looked at me, looked at her. But Karina knew him. Karina was frozen against the wall, her breathing shallow, staring at a man she hadn't seen in 11 years. A man she believed was in another city, ruined, old, and with no one who ever believed a word he said. Enrique walked to the table. He didn't shout, he didn't point. He placed his cardboard box tied with string on the wood and spoke to the notary. Good morning. My name is Enrique. This woman was married to my son, Lucian, in another city, under another name. He untied the string. And that gentleman over there was also in his life, under another name. I reported him 5 years ago, and no one would listen to me. He looked up. I brought everything. Diego was the first to fall, and he fell the way they always do, trying to save himself. When the notary finished reviewing the first half of Enrique's box, with the room in absolute silence, Diego stood up and said he had nothing to do with it, that he was a hired consultant, that if there were irregularities in the partnership, that was the administrator's responsibility, and that he hadn't even known that lady before this year. Karina, against the wall, looked at him and said a single phrase. 11 years, Diego. Just 2 words and a number. Diego, shut up. And there, at that table, without shouting, with 7 people watching, 11 years of partnership broke in two. The notary suspended the transaction. I didn't sign anything. The only thing I signed that day was a statement where everything that was said in that room was recorded, word for word, that the buyer in the original contract was not the buyer present, that the payment was directed to a partnership administered by my wife under another name, that a general power of attorney existed and was presented to me over coffee, and that a third party was present, providing documentation of analogous events that occurred in another city. That document was what opened everything up. What came next wasn't fast, and it wasn't like a movie. It took 14 months. Diego faced the heaviest charges. When they reviewed his operations, 2 other people appeared, besides Lucian and me, a 61-year-old man who lost a warehouse and a widow who lost the money from the sale of her house and never reported it out of shame. Both testified. The warehouse and the house had gone through different frontmen, but the pattern was the same. And the same friendly consultant appeared in all 3 stories with 3 different names. He ended up prosecuted for fraud, use of false documents, and criminal association. He is serving his sentence. The partnership was dissolved and the accounts frozen. Karina, Laura, had a different path, and it's important I tell it as it was, without embellishment. She was never charged with anything related to Lucian's death. There was nothing to charge her with. Lucian died of a heart attack, alone, ruined, and that is not anyone's crime. That is a consequence, and consequences are not judged in a court of law. But she was prosecuted for the fraud, for the partnership, for the sole administration, for the document with the old name, for her proven participation in the operation of my workshop and Lucian's, where Enrique's box had her signature on 3 documents she always believed no one would ever read. She received a lesser sentence than Diego's, and she lost the rest. She lost the new name, she lost the marriage, she lost the ability to ever approach a man again without her story being written in a public file. The divorce was quick. She didn't contest anything. She couldn't. The workshop was never sold. I saw her one last time, outside a hearing. She was sitting alone in a hallway, her hands in her lap. I approached her because I needed to ask one thing. Was any of it ever real? She looked up. She thought for a long time, and I think it was the only time I saw her truly think in front of me without calculating the answer. At first, no, she said. Later, a little. And that's what made the work harder. She stood up and walked down the hall. I never saw her again. That answer destroyed me for months. Later, with time, I understood it was the most honest thing she had said to me in 4 years, and that it was also exactly the trap, to be left chewing on that a little for the rest of my life. I didn't do it. I chose not to. Now, what's left? Juliana and I have dinner every Thursday. The 2 years we lost can't be recovered, but we can stop losing them. One day, after a lot of wine, I apologized for the bitter comment. She said she already knew. I told her I needed to say it anyway. She started crying and told me she had spent 2 years waiting for me to call, checking her phone, and that when I finally did, her first thought wasn't good, but please don't let it be too late. Marco turned out to be an extraordinary guy, and today he's my friend. I do his breaks for free, and he gets mad every time. And Enrique. Enrique was 71 when I met him, and today he's 74. I named the back storeroom of the shop after him, the one my dad used for old parts, because we fix it up together. He comes by almost every day. He sits on the bench where my father used to sit to eat, reads the newspaper, gives his opinion on things I didn't ask about, and at 2 in the afternoon he yells that the food is getting cold. He never said, "I told you so." He never made me feel stupid for having loved her. One day I asked him how he managed to spend 5 years looking for a woman no one believed existed, and he answered that he wasn't looking for her. "I was looking for someone who was still on time," he said. "I couldn't save my son anymore, but I could save the next one." I gave him the photograph back. It's the only one where his son is laughing. And the wallet. I still have the wallet. It's the same one, more worn out. A seam broke, and I sewed it myself with upholstery thread. Badly, crookedly, but I won't change it. Inside is still the photo of my dad in front of the shop, and I've added a second one. Enrique and I, the day we finished the storeroom, both covered in dust, him with that face of his like he's holding back a laugh. Sometimes, when someone asks me how I figured it out, I answer with the truth, and the truth sounds like a lie. I didn't figure anything out. I wasn't smart. I was blind and happy, and 9 days away from losing my father's life's work. A man who didn't know me crossed the street for me, gave me back my closed wallet, refused a single penny, didn't tell me his name, and gave me the only instruction that could work on a man like me, who wouldn't have believed a word he said. Don't open it now, son. Put it under your wife's pillow tonight and watch. He didn't ask me to believe him. He asked me to watch. And that's the only thing I ask of anyone who has made it this far. If something in your house isn't adding up, if there are strange silences, if there are papers that someone else always collects, if your family has suddenly become the enemy, don't confront anyone yet. Don't accuse. Don't shout. Just watch. Really look one night with your eyes wide open. Because almost always the truth isn't hidden. It's right there in plain sight, waiting for us to stop being afraid to see it.